Hey everybody, some Gadget Guy here, and don't you hate it when people name their YouTube video something really exciting and salacious like Showdown Fight Battle Between Smartphones for Victory of Blood and Nokia, blah. Okay, so we are going to do a quick comparison between these two phones, but you guys should know by now that I am not a big fan of device versus device showdown battle fight kinds of videos, just because it often just becomes someone reading off the various specs off the side of the box. This has a 5-inch 1080p's, and this has a 6-inch 1080p's. And so what I wanted to do is just briefly describe some of my usage in getting to play with these guys for a couple days. I've only had the 1520 for a little while, so I actually haven't done a full long-term review on that. I've only had the Lumia Icon for about a week, so I'm still putting it through my paces. And on first impressions, I mean, just sliding through general performance, these two perform almost exactly the same. In fact, so much so that many of the articles that I've written, especially reviews of the Icon that have come out like the day this phone was released, that it's pretty much the same thing, but it's only in a smaller screen. But there are a few things that I think are important to discuss. First off, this all polycarb body. On first impressions, I like this better as sort of a general phone usage kind of feel. It's a matte finish, it wraps around the edges, they taper gracefully. This really reminds me of my favorite aspects of phones like the Lumia 1020. It kind of helps the fit in the hand a little bit better. And I'm not always such a huge fan of the more blocky and rectangular phones. I really didn't like the feel of the Lumia 928 in the hand. And between the two, they're really difficult to compare because this is so much larger in the 1520, but I don't like that sharp corner right there as it hits the palm of my hand and it kind of digs in, especially when I'm trying to do things like reach over to that back button. Now, in terms of general usage, it is kind of nice that I have a phone that I can reach that back button, because that is certainly not true on the 1520. See, on the 1520, as I try and, you see, just look what I did right there. I instantly have to go to two hands because I've got tiny, girly little hands, and cradling it on fingertips, on the very tips, at the very edges of my fingers, I still can't reach that back button. I have to go two-handed. Now, watching media, watching Netflix, watching movies, stuff like that, I really do prefer the larger screen experience of the 1520. And since the 1520 has been in my house, especially some of these other phablets, I've just had no use for picking up my Nexus 7 at all. There's a larger screen here. It's actually a nicer screen than my, because I have the older Nexus 7, and it performs admirably for that kind of multimedia experience. But on the go, I tend to prefer this size. This size screen, I think 5 inches is a near perfect phone screen, especially for you guys who are in cold climates right now. When you turn on that ultra high sensitivity display, here I can try and pull it up while we're talking. When you pull up that super sensitive touch setting, bam, on the 1520, that reach around action, trying to get to the other edge of the screen, can sometimes trigger a screen touch or a screen tap. Even just like that flesh on your hand can sometimes trigger a touch inadvertently just because the screen is so sensitive. But you want to leave that setting on because maybe you're wearing gloves and it's really cold outside. Now, one of the things that I do have to give the Icon though is in this flat-edged ergonomic shape or shell, that shooting photos and video is actually easier for me to do because I have a ledge that my fingers can hold on to a little bit easier. This is funny because normally I wouldn't be praising this kind of boxy design, but this actually does give me something to hold on to. So especially when I'm trying to frame a shot, or maybe I'm worried that my fingers might be a little slippery or I might be a little sweaty, that is easier to hold on to than the more graceful rounded corners here on the 1520. I always kind of feel like if there was just the slightest little bump or prod, I might slip off of that, especially if you're outside and you're out doing things. You want to make sure you've got as good a grip on this thing as possible, so you end up doing something more like, I end up doing something more like kind of pushing it into the pads of my fingers right there, but then I have to be careful not to block the microphones. So it just never really quite feels as safe to use out and about. Even after only having the Icon for a couple days, I feel like I've got a better handle on this one. I've got a better grip on it, even though I don't necessarily love the corners on the Lumia Icon. And much has been made about the other differences on these two devices. You know, it's one of the things, like, I have a hard time doing comparison videos because I respect you guys so much. I figure if you have found my channel on the YouTubes, then you are savvy enough with a web browser to be able to look up things like the specs on both of these devices. You don't need me to just sit here and regurgitate the various things that are in and out. We know that there's wireless charging on the Lumia Icon based on the QI or Qi platform, however you want to pronounce that. I'm a little disappointed in at&t for removing that QI compatibility or the Qi compatibility with the 1520, especially as I didn't want to rip it off of my desk to shoot this video, but I do have a QI compatible charger that the Lumia Icon is going to be spending a little more time on. I find it's going to be a little hard to show on video, but I find that the Lumia Icon is just a touch brighter. I'm going to try and turn this up to high, if that makes any profound difference. Now, in person, this screen looks brighter and has slightly truer whites than the screen on the Lumia 1520. Now, that's a very minor criticism between these two, because the whites on the 1520 are good, but they're ever so slightly just a touch more yellow than the whites on the Lumia Icon. But lastly, just in terms of fit, finish, and ergonomics, one of the major things that actually kind of bums me out about the 1520 are these little doors right here. So we've got the memory card and the SIM card slot. On the Lumia Icon, we've got this little door right here at the top. It matches the rest of this metal finish. It blends in perfectly. Everything locks together in a really nice, clean, tight package. Even the buttons on the side don't have any of that wiggle or wobble. The camera has a little bit of a jitter to it, just because it is a dual stage camera button. You focus and press the picture. You've got two little levels to depress, but it's not like even the power button on the iPhone 5S, which now rattles. Unfortunately, on the 1520, the polycarb, which normally fits together really snugly and really tight, does have a lot of wiggle and wobble, at least on my 1520, where these buttons jitter and click, and there's a definite feel or vibration to them when you're sort of using the phone. There's that tiny little bit of a rattle to them. I just question why I need two different doors. You know, each one of these has its own little pin locking mechanism, which means that this isn't going to fit together as fleshly or as cleanly. Especially since the Lumia 2520 has both of those, the SIM card and the memory card slot, hidden behind one door. It just seems to be a much cleaner way to achieve that same solution. Now, it should be pretty clear, side-by-siding these two different phones, that I'm leaning ever so slightly towards the Lumia Icon, especially just for the general ergonomics of having a slightly more reasonable phone-like screen. But I can't fault either of these devices. The Lumia Icon on Verizon Wireless and the Lumia 1520 on at&t both represent an amazing step forward for Windows Phone, bringing the best of what Microsoft and Nokia has to offer to the table. And they give us these tantalizing little teasers towards where another future Uber camera device, like an update to the Lumia 1020, might go, especially if I could get my hands on this kind of Qualcomm 800 series performance in these high-resolution displays with that monster 2/3 inch 41 megapixel image sensor that's bolted on the back of the 1020. I'm just getting a little short of breath. I mean, it's like, whew, I'm kind of swooning over here. So folks, those are my thoughts on the Lumia Icon versus the Lumia 1520. I think they're both fantastic devices, but they definitely fulfill very different consumer needs, if even just for the differences in screen size alone. And if there's anything that you've been wanting to know about either of these devices, definitely be dropping me some comments on my videos, on this video, on other videos. I'm gonna be having speaker tests for both of these devices coming out soon. Of course, my camera tests, because I'm really curious to see how the 20 megapixel shooter on these cameras compares to that 41 megapixel monster on the Lumia 1020. So folks, as always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing, for subscribing to my channel, leaving me comments, getting in debates. It's always super fun hanging out with you guys online, and I will catch you all on the next video.